Martin, how are you and where are we?
You know where we are. We've got today, for this Sunday, the reading Luke 21, 5 to 19.
That's right.
Which is the first part of this section of, as it were, well, I don't know whether you properly call it apocalyptic writing, but it's a passage which there's an equivalent in Matthew and in Mark.
Yeah.
And I'm struck that I'm pretty sure that Remembrance Sunday always coincides with a reading in this territory. We don't.
It's Kingdom season, and they get a bit apocalyptic this time.
And it's just the way we progress through the Gospel of the year. And I'm struck. I think G.B. Caird, this is a long time ago, in his
New Testament scholar of
commentary on Luke, observed that in this particular section, the passage begins with Jesus predicting the collapse of the temple. Not one stone will remain on another, and the disciples asking a question: what will the signs be, and when will this happen? And Caird observes that Mark doesn't answer the question. Matthew changes the question to fit the answer, and Luke changes the answer to fit the question.
So do you think when Jesus gave the answer there was a loud cough and nobody heard it?
But I think the thing that strikes me, fundamentally, and this is where I think it for me it ties in with our reflections on Remembrance Sunday. Fundamentally, whatever is going on, however awful things seem, we are still living in the sovereignty of God, under the sovereignty of God. And the interesting thing for me about what Luke has done with this is first of all, he's made it clear that not everything is going to happen at once. There's going to be, things are going to happen over a period of time. He's got a couple of phrases in that just attenuates the time frame in a way that Mark doesn't. And he's portraying the way he's framed this. Jesus is clearly being a prophet. So he is saying he's already predicted his passion, and of course the readers of the gospel will know that prediction came true. He's now saying, and you will suffer many things in my name.
Yeah.
That's happening. Oh, so that's come true. And of course they will probably, this was written when we believe it was written, they will have seen the destruction of the temple. And so there's a sense in which the ultimate things that will happen will also be true one day, because Jesus has already demonstrated that his predictions are trustworthy. Yeah. So which all underlines this profound sense of whatever is going on, God is sovereign.
Yeah. So when I first read it, what I suppose I was struck by was this being willing to sacrifice even your life for fidelity to the way, and within the sovereignty of God, and how far in the 21st century it feels we are, and how far away this picture seems. And one of the theories is that 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 this was written at a time when, as you say, all the clues were coming together in terms of the return of Jesus and the actual instigation of the kingdom in its fullness and the sovereignty of God being actually palpably realised. And this gave impetus and conviction to those who were, in mortal danger. Whereas, as time went by, and it appeared to be the case that there was a stability to the Christian empire, this kind of sense of urgency and the need for this kind of sacrifice dissipated. And we find ourselves in that kind of situation, although some commentators says the sense of the apocalyptic has returned through the 20th century because of the massive genocides and because of the even in the West as well as elsewhere in the world, there's this awareness of the wrestling of good with evil. But if I ask myself personally, I'm willing to put my life on the line for the faith, and I think to get down to brass tacks, if it's a quick bullet, well, that'd be all right, but ongoing torture for weeks, I'm not so sure I'd manage, you know what I mean? And I'm thinking, what is the kind of conviction that enabled the early martyrs to do that? I was on sabbatical, I was reading a book by a German called Mosbach called The 21, and he was talking about a very recent example of this, the 21 who died, who were decapitated on the Libyan beach by ISIS, and 20 of those were Coptic Christians, and he went to see the village where they had come from, and the villagers were in no way surprised that they had sacrificed their lives, and said, yeah, well, they're like us, they're normal, of course we do that, this is our faith. And it's a martyr church living in a minority situation whose narrative is a willingness to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the gospel, living under the sovereignty of God. And it feels a long way from the Christian culture of Western Europe.
Well, but that's because we've got a highly individualised understanding of what it means to be a Christian. So all of our language about discipleship is about individual pathways.
Yeah.
It's not about how are we incorporated into the body. How are we part of a collective whole? We don't have that our congregations are a collection of individuals rather than a body that we are incorporated into, centred on the Eucharist and the Word. And there's something in that territory, I think, which it always frustrates me that we attend to. Sorry, you've got me on a little drag, but that we attend to this individualistic approach rather than saying, how do we learn to worship and live together? That's the key to our the Coptic Christians and others in those sorts of circumstances, their primary experience of the Christian faith is worshipping together.
Yeah, and two things kind of like bleed into that. First of all, that the first thing they say is, this kind of death doesn't undermine our faith. This inspires and strengthens our faith. But the word "our" there is really important.
It's our.
And the second thing is, so many of those Coptic Christians who died were in one way or another embedded deeply in the worshipping life of the Coptic Church. But not just embedded in it, a lot of them were members of the choir. Now you may think, so what? What's that, Tuesday night, once a week? No, it's not. You are ordained into the choir in the Coptic Church, and the service itself is 3 hours, never mind the rest of the time. This is something that seeps into your bones and into your life. So it becomes part of who you are. They can no more renounce following Jesus than they can renounce their DNA, it feels, at that point. So there is something about kind of the sobering witness and the the challenge to us, And I sometimes worry that we dilute this sense of commitment to the vocation we're required to keep faith to. In 1 Thessalonians 5 it says, God has not destined us for wrath but for salvation in Jesus Christ. But that does not exclude us from the insecurities of this world, which we are to face in the light of that, not giving us an excuse just to conform to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.